Hello, my name is Ian. I'm a software engineer on Managed Play, and I will be walking us through the next couple topics. So the first thing that I want to talk about is this new API that we released last year that allows you to create service accounts automatically. So we've been spending a lot of time over the past year thinking about ways to address sticking points inside of the customer creation flow. And the goal has been to allow you to create a properly managed Android customer in under 5 minutes. So one area that we've been looking to improve is the creation of service accounts to manage customer data. So just to recap, give you a refresher on what these service accounts are that we're talking about. So there are two kinds of service accounts in Managed Play. And the first is called the Enterprise Service Account. So this is an account that you, the EMM, use to manage data that belongs to an individual enterprise. So for example, if an enterprise adds a new user or adds a new device, then this is where that will appear or where you'll create it. Both of these kinds of service accounts are just for authenticating with the enterprise APIs. So you can't log in as them, for example. And the second kind is the master service account. And this is the service account that the EMM uses to manage the EMM level data. So for example, when you add a new enterprise, you'll use the master service account to do that. So the reason why we have this separation is to separate data between enterprises. So for example, this allows on-premise boxes to manage data that only belongs to one particular enterprise and isolates the data of other enterprises from that box. And finally, these service accounts are created through the Google Cloud Console. That's the main way which you'll actually get access to one of these. And so every time you create an enterprise, you will bind a service account to an enterprise, and that service account is what we call the ESA. So this is just a quick diagram of the enrollment flow, and we'll sort of go over the high-level bits. Now, I'll note that there are two enrollment flows. This is the more recent one that we've developed. So basically, in the first part of this, you get an enterprise token and a completion token. And in our other flow, the admin goes to their domain settings to get this binding token. But I want to draw your attention to the bottom half here, and this is where we get the service account details, and then we call this thing called enterprises.setAccount. Now, once we call that setAccount, the enterprise is bound to the EMM. So this is the binding that we're talking about. So what happens inside of that red box? So today there are two main methods of acquiring an ESA. So the first thing that you can do is you can instruct an admin to go to the Cloud Developer Console and actually create one of these things. And this gets us the data separation that I talked about, which is the reason why we have this model. But it has the drawback of being complicated. So the Google Cloud Console is a totally separate product, and the admin has to go through a ton of steps to actually get this thing set up. Now, the second half of the other way you can do this to work around that time-consuming setup process is to use a shared ESA, and this is where every single enterprise uses the same service account. So the upside of this, obviously, is that you can just store these credentials on your EMM server, and the setup becomes really, really fast. The downside is that this is not suitable for on-premise deployments, and you don't get the clean sort of data separation that we intended when we designed the API this way. So very pointedly, like if you have an on-premise box in this model, anybody who has access to the ESA credentials can modify the data of any enterprise. So you can't just keep that on the on-premise box. So to make things easier, we've added, so obviously that's no good. We'd like to have sort of one way to do this that is both fast and correct. So what we've created is this automatic service account creation API. And there's a few different calls here that you need to know about. So the first is the get service account call. And this lets you create a new service account. It gets you everything you need to get off the ground with that. It gives you the authentication keys, the service account name. So when you make this call during the setup flow, you will be ready to bind the service account to the enterprise. The second thing that we've made is this set of APIs called service account keys. And this is a set of key management APIs that you can use after you've made the service account the set it to be your ESA. One thing to note is that this works with both managed Google Play accounts and Google managed accounts. So if you are using this with either setup flow, this will work. And we'll see where that fits in here. So now we can take a quick look at how this fits into your enrollment flow. So again, we talked about calling complete signup. The other call in the second flow is enroll. And following that, before, you would have had to go to the Cloud Console or use your OneESA. Create the project, enable the API, et cetera. So to replace that, you simply call this get service account API, get your service account and key, and then you call set account to bind the ESA to the enterprise. So we'll dive into a short little code example here. So again, the first thing that we do here is we call complete signup with our completion token and our enterprise token. We extract the enterprise ID from that response. Again, it could be enroll instead. The second thing we do is we actually call get service account, and that is where we get this new service account. One thing to note is that we support the same key types that you see inside of the Cloud Console. So if you use the regular Google credentials or you use the PKCS12 file, we support either type of those that you can get from the API. The final thing you do, obviously, is you call set account. So once you're set up, we have a set of APIs in the service account keys resource. And these are used to manage the keys in the service accounts that you create using the API. So we have an insert, a delete in the list, kind of what you'd expect. These are pretty straightforward to use, and these are some examples. And the main use case for these APIs is going to be like key rotation, for example. So if you're following good security practices, every few months you can rotate your keys. And before, an admin would have had to do that. But with this API, you can actually do that programmatically within our API. So again, it simplifies things quite a bit for you. One other quick thing that I'll note here is that for Google Keys, you always have the key ID. So we have our API that gives you a response that has the ID. And that is the same ID as the one that you'll see inside the Google Key file. If you don't know, that's just the Google Key files are just a JSON file, so you can actually dig into those and read them. The other thing that I'll note is that we have this X509 cert URL inside of the Google Key file, and we actually returned that in the response. This was due to some customer feedback that the data that you get from this URL was useful. It's a public key that is sometimes used for authentication purposes. So we've added that to our response too to help simplify the setup flow for you. So again, if you have feedback about the API, let us know. And that's about it for this. So the service account keys resource is only going to work for accounts created the API. So you create an account, and you can use this. You can't just use this with any service account that you've bound. And you can only use get service account during the setup process. Once you are totally set up, we disable this call. And that's it for service accounts. So we have a guide here that you can go to get a whole bunch of information on how to implement this. This is just updating the setup flow documentation, so you can see exactly where this fits in no matter what flow you're using. Okay. Now that we're off that, we'll transition to the second half of what I'm talking about here, which is the managed play iframe. So we've known for a while that EMMs have wanted a way to do app approval and search and discovery within the EMM console. So up until now, that's been really difficult. So if you wanted to have a search and discovery experience, we have the managed Play Store website at play.google.com/work. But there's a big cognitive load there where an admin needs to go between those two different places, the EMM console and that website, to actually approve apps. And the list of admins for that site is actually totally different. You have to manage that list separately, and those admins actually need Google accounts, which may not be the case for your EMM console. So there have been some ways that we've tried to simplify this in the past and that you've worked around it. You might use a pre-configured set of apps and use the permissions iframe that we've created. or you may scrape the Play Store to get app IDs. That latter thing is very strongly discouraged, so if you're doing that, please stop. But so to simplify the process, we think we can do better, and we have created the Play for Work iframes, or the Manage Play iframes. So if we could jump over to the laptop very quickly, please. Okay, so I am in the Android management experience now. So we're going to suppose for a moment that I am an admin, and this is my EMM console, and I would like to add a new app, or I would like to approve an app for my enterprise. So I'm going to go to Choose and Manage Apps. I'm going to click on Add More Apps. And this dialog thing that you see here pop up, this is the iframe. So again, this looks a lot like the Managed Play Store if you've gone to play.google.com/work, but this is within my EMM console. And you can see here you get a lot of the same things. You've got a cluster of you've got clusters of apps, you've got search capability. I'm actually going to go ahead and search for an app. Search results. Again, very, very similar. And this is the app that I want. I'm going to go ahead and click Approve. Approve this. The iframe closes, and my EMM console updates to reflect that I've just approved this app. So that, in a nutshell, is what you can do with the iframe. That's sort of the main flow that we're providing. So if we could switch back, please. Before I get into any technical details, I'd like to take just a minute to talk about all the different things that we are doing here. So Marco just mentioned the basic store layout. So if you integrate with the iframe, you'll actually get most of what you need to get that showing up on user devices. So you approve an app in the iframe, and it is automatically added to the basic store layout. All you need to do is make it available to users by assigning it to them via set available product set, for example. One other really big thing that we have here is that there is authentication within the iframe that's not based on a Google account. So you don't need a Google account at all to use this. It's based on a token, and we'll talk about exactly how that works in a moment. The third thing that we have is a fully customizable UI. So you can supply custom search queries. You can load directly into a page of search results. You can add and remove the search box. Different ways to make your life easier when you're integrating with this and make it fit really nicely into your EMM console. So, and the last thing is that we've added a bunch of hooks for user actions inside of our iframe. So whenever a user approves, selects, or unapproves an app inside of the iframe, your console will get a message saying that that's just happened, and you can respond in your own UI based on an action that the user's taken. By the way, this is just the starting set of features. We will be definitely adding more, so definitely try to get on board with this if you can. So in terms of how to get started implementing this, there's sort of two big parts that you need to worry about. The first part is that you need to integrate with the EMM API. And so we've added a new call here called enterprises.createWebToken. And this is a token that has around a 20-minute lifetime, and this is sort of your ticket to load the iframe for a particular enterprise. So if you have one of these, you can load an iframe. There's no Google account required, like we said. This is done by using your ESA. You'll supply a few different properties, like a parent URL and some permissions that you want the user to have based on the actions that you want them to be able to take inside of the iframe. So just to give you a quick example here, we can see that we've created this token specification. We've added some permissions and a parent URL, and we've gone ahead and created a token. The response to this API call is literally the token that you're going to pass to the second half of the API, which is a small JavaScript library that we've created to help you handle a lot of the boilerplate for getting this thing up and running. So the main thing that you'll need here is that there's a custom handler. There's a bunch of options to customize the appearance and behavior, and we'll go over a couple of those. So this right here is just a small chunk of example code. And I'll go over the high-level bits with you. So in the top few lines here, we include a script tag for our library, and we define a container div, which is going to actually contain our iframe. Then we have our actual script tag that has the bulk of our logic. So the first thing that you see is a callback function, and this is called when the user takes an action inside of the iframe, such as approving or unapproving an app. And you can see that we view both the action and the product ID. The second half is a block of code to actually load the iframe. In this example, we supply it with our token. We start the iframe in approve mode. We have approve and select. We decide that we want to show a search box, and we specify that our callback function will handle the user actions inside of the iframe. This is a second quick example. So you can see here that we also have, in this case, we are doing the same sort of loading, except that we are not going to show a search box, and we are going to load directly into a page of search results. So I'm just about done, but I'd like to talk a little bit about a few little UI things, implementation tips. We don't have any published user experience guidelines, but this I think will sort of give you some ideas for how to handle user behavior inside of the iframe. So if we could switch back very quickly to the demo. Thank you. So again, I'm still in the entry management experience. I'm going to pop the iframe open here real quick. So the main thing that we recommend when you use this is having a sort of a one app per instance of the iframe approval flow. So the idea is that the user decides to add an app, they go into the iframe, they go to the detail page, they approve, you close the iframe, and your UI responds based on that. So again, same sort of thing you see in entry management experience is that we go here, we go through the permissions, we approve. And then we refresh our UI based on that. Now, one thing to note is that we don't have any sophisticated detail page in Android management experience, but this is a great place for you to transition to a product, your own sort of product detail page, where the user can immediately start assigning the app to different users in the domain, or you can start modifying the managed configuration. One other thing that you'll need to handle is that there's one other case, which is that an admin has already approved an app. And in this case, we have select and unapprove. We kind of recommend handling the select button in the same way as approve. So just transition the user very neatly to the detail page where they can, again, modify the managed configuration or assign the app to users. This is mostly a convenience thing for admins, so they don't sort of get stuck here. And the unapprove button is probably not a thing that you need to worry about too much. Again, we update the UI when a user clicks on this, but just sort of keep that in mind that these are the three actions, and these exist in any version of the iframe. So I think that's just about it. If we can switch back. Yeah, so we have a full implementation guide for this. We've created a whole bunch of new documentation, and this has everything you need to get off the ground. It includes different ways of instantiating the iframe. There's a bunch of parameters that you can supply to it, and there's a ton of sample code on there. So go ahead and check that out and let us know what you think. Thanks. And Fred is going to come up now, and he's going to talk about EMM notifications.